Hi guys, and welcome back to Dizzy Sew and Sew Tutorials. In the last skills tutorial you learned how to do a single and double bias bound binding, and this is the project that we're going to use it on. We're going to make a coaster. Really simple, but it looks fantastic when you've got a set of matching coasters and placemats. They're exactly the same principle. Obviously the placemats are bigger, you just use more stuff. Okay, so what do you need to make these placemats and coasters? You need some pattern fabric of your choosing, whatever you fancy, whatever you like. I'm using Insul Bright, but you could just use some wadding. It's just going on the table to protect it from plates and cups. Insul Bright's a special sort of heat resistant wadding that we used in the Tea Cozy project. And then a darker, this is like a cotton weave, heavy cotton weave fabric, just the underside that's going to get all the bits of splodgy ketchup and gravy from the dinner and any drips of tea, so the darker the better, and it can all be chucked in the wash at the end. And then of course your bias binding or your bias tape. I've chosen a nice red to match the main fabric. It's got lots of reds that are picked out, and that's pretty much all we need, other than your sewing machine and all your sewing kit. So let's crack on. Okay, the first thing we need to do is to sew our three components together. We've got our lining or the bottom fabric, we've got our Insul Bright, and then we've got our main pattern fabric on the top. And all we're going to do with this is layer it up like this, and then we're going to sew around the edge to make a nice square, and then we're going to trim close to that seam, so when we bind it all that stitching is hidden. Okay, so I'm ready with my machine. I've got my 3 layers of material, and I'm just going to sew around the edge. Don't forget to lock stitch, and if you're lucky enough to have a machine like this, which you can position either in the up or down position when it finishes, make sure it's in a down position for when we get to the corners. So when we get to the corner, we're going to leave the needle in the work. If you don't have the luxury of a machine that always finishes in the down or up position, turn the handle so it's in your workpiece, in your fabric. Lift your sewing foot, and then turn your work 90 degrees, and then place your sewing foot back down. You can carry on stitching. Okay, so there you have it. You've sewn around all 4 edges, and now we're going to trim it. So we have just a few millimeters, say 4 millimeters seam allowance, and then we'll get on with the binding. So I'll just trim that. So I've just trimmed up all the seam allowance to about 4 millimeters all the way around, and then we're going to start with our bias binding as we did in the skills tutorial. We're just going to line up that outer edge, and we're going to start sewing along this first crease line. And we're going to stop about 1 centimetre from the end to deal with the corners. Now this is tricky, so we'll take our time with this. Okay, so this is the tricky part. We've come to a corner. Now we need to stop our stitching, do a little back stitch, 1 centimetre from the edge of our work, and we'll mark it with a pin. So we'll put a pin in the bias tape on the very edge of our work, and then we fold it up so the bias binding makes this 45 degree angle with the corners matching up here. A bit tricky. So you've got this nice 45 degree angle going into the corner. Then where the pin is, you fold it back. A bit like fabric origami at the moment. Okay, so we've there folded it back, making sure all our bias tape is folded out. So you can see it just sits proud of this edge a little bit. Okay, so the next bit is we need to measure the distance in between where we've sewn and the centre crease of our bias tape. Which is 1 centimetre for this bias tape. It might be different if you've got thicker tape or wider tape. So 1 centimetre down from this top edge where we folded it. I know this is a bit tricky, but bear with me. Where we folded it, we want to draw a little mark. So I've made a mark here at 1 centimetre down. Draw a nice straight line with your ruler. And now we draw a triangle from this centre fold, which is running this way, to where the folds are in the sides of the bias binding. So I'll draw that and I'll zoom in so you can see. So there's our little triangle, and what we've got to do now is sew along that line there and that line there, but not the work itself, just the bias binding. Come to the point of our triangle. So I'm going to turn it back and then come down this line. Just try and keep it under control. It's very fiddly, you don't have a lot to work with. And then when you get to the crease, just back stitch. So now we can line up the edge of our bias binding again. With the edge of our work and carry on sewing. Stopping 1 centimetre again from the corner, and I'll show you the result from the corners. We'll trim this off a bit better afterwards, but I just want to show you what you're trying to achieve. You fold the corner through, pull it all out nice and square, and then when you fold it over, you've got this wonderful mitered corner, which is all encased within the bias binding. Isn't it great? And you just repeat that for the other corners. I've done one here already. So we are. Two great corners. we'll do the next one, and then I'll show you how to finish off on the last one. So I'll just do that other corner. So when you've done all the corners, you'll end up with something looking like this. Just fold through your corners. Getting them as nice and sharp as you can. Okay. Do the same on the back, folding in that bias tape underneath. Get it all nice and tucked up out of the way. Okay. And then on the last corner, just fold this edge back. So open up your bias tape. It needs to be folded back so it's in line with this edge. It's easier said than done. And then you just fold it in. Very, very fiddly job. And with big buffoon hands like mine, you do have to be a little bit careful, fiddle with it, work with it. In fact, what I've noticed that I've not given myself enough bias tape here to finish that mitered edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it square, and I'm just going to fold in these edges, which is a shame really, because it would be nice to have a mitered edge. But fold those in just to cover that edge, that corner. But ideally you would mitre it like the other corners. It'll be easier to handle once you've given it a press. But there you go. We'll give it a good press, and then we'll start stitching in the ditch to close off the back. So back in a mo, I'll just give it a press. Right, so the work's all pressed now and we're ready to stitch in the ditch. And you can see I've put the needle, lined the needle up straight away, and it's in the work. And all I have to do now, hopefully, is keep it in the ditch. I've zoomed in, so I'm sitting off to one side, making my excuses now. So hopefully you can see exactly what I mean. So a little back stitch, my head's not in the way, good. Oops. At the corners, leave the needle in the work. Just pull that under a little bit. There we go. Turn the work and then foot back down again. Okay, so there you have it, all stitched in the ditch. Nice mitered corners. More stitching in the ditch there, it's great. And that should have covered the back edge there, enclosing all the raw edge of the bias binding. Not bad, quite happy with that. Now it's your turn, have a go. Well, thanks for watching Dizzy So-and-so and today's project, which was the coaster. Don't forget, you can use the same techniques in making placemats, and you can make yourself a whole set, so when the guys come round for dinner, everyone will be really impressed and they go, where'd you get those from? Maybe you could make them a set. So happy sewing, and I look forward to your next video with Dizzy So-and-so. Oh yeah, don't forget to subscribe.